Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and welcome to the channel. For for those that do not know, this show goes live 6 a.m. Monday through Friday, and we also TriCast the show on YouTube, Twitch, and our own Discord server. So, if you are brand new to the channel, please be aware that you can join the channel live in any of those formats and join our own. Uh, Please join our own Discord server so you can hang out with some of the cool kids because we hang out there down in the boiler room. So today, our show, we are still deep diving into a series that I'm calling Cutting Class, which where we take the classic Dungeons and Dragons classes and we kind of break them apart and we talk about it all week long. Essentially, it's a long form format, you guys coming in live and me being the talking head, the moderator of the brilliance of you out there in the tabletop RPG community. And we are now up to the monk. And as the format of the channel goes, each day we do subdivide whatever it is we're talking about. So today, or it being Monster Monday, we're going to talk about Monster Mondays reserved for like monsters, adversaries, NPCs, enemies, and those sorts of things. We also have Trope Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar of Exploration Thursday, and then, of course, Future Friday, a dedication to science fiction, especially like transhumanist tabletop games. But here on Monster Monday, thought we would talk about the monk itself, and of course, some of the problematic issues with even the title monk. And let's get into some enemies, adversaries, NPCs, and that sort of thing when it comes to our creative corner of the internet here. So one of the issues with the monk and a number of other Dungeons and Dragons classes in general is that we as gamers unfortunately get caught up with a lot of semantics. Just the word itself becomes layers onto it so much baggage that it's very difficult to get rid of it. Now, for those of you that aren't old enough to remember when Dungeons and Dragons began in the mid 70s, there was an explosion of far eastern martial arts and culture that swept the states here, and in no small part due to one individual known as Bruce Lee, and who was an icon of many martial um, Asian, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Thailand. A lot of that swept over here. Also, a large part of that, not just that it happened to be in movies and television, but a lot of people stateside were sent over there due to military reasons and the expansion of the world. And so a lot of that culture came back here, somewhat filtered, maybe some of it done in poor taste, no doubt. But that being said, a lot of that culture came here during the mid 70s, and of course, when Dungeons and Dragons was created, you couldn't avoid wanting, you know, Gary Gygax and the crew, Arneson and the rest of them. You couldn't really avoid wanting to put in these other martial artists around the world, and so a lot of players in the current context, there's a real love-hate relationship with the monk as a class, simply because of the baggage it draws with it. I mean, you hear the word monk, and unfortunately, here in the States, we think of saffron robes and bald heads and meditation and Shaolin martial artists practicing martial maneuvers based on animals and things, and the the I the classical stereotypical Shaolin monk doesn't quite fit into the very Eurocentricized ideal of um, the origins of Dungeons and Dragons. So, two issues. I'm going to label these as two issues with monks and Dungeons and Dragons. Is A, the label, and B, the operation of said class, of the said class. And what I mean by the operation is that um, in a Tolkienesque world, we imagine battling things larger than life: ogres, dragons, giants, um, demons, and things that are 5 times our size, and we want to take down those enemies. And the the idea of the martial monk um, seems to have challenges that aren't necessarily in line with that kind of storytelling. Um, yeah, the the idea that a monk defeats things by just killing it sometimes doesn't fit inside of there, because we think of meditation, we think of wisdom, we think of peace and problem solving, and we don't really know about, or we haven't had a lot of those um, Monkey King stories told to us here since the 70s. And so therefore the stereotype of the saffron robed monk um, battling ogres and giants and undead and such doesn't seem to quite fit, especially when you're punching things with your and kicking things with your hands and feet. Yeah. Tired Needs Sleep says you could have a brother Cadful style monk, like a furious Benedictine monk wearing a cassock. Yes, or you could have a monk as a street brawler or a boxer. Well, and again, the we in the RPG community, we get caught up in a lot of semantics, and unfortunately a lot of the titles of especially the classes and descriptor words that we use aren't emblematic of what it is, because had the word monk not been used and something like martial artist or pugilist or um, martial expert or some other term, then you could say, oh, well, every culture in the entire world at some point in history has had a martial expert based on where you live, right? Like, I'm thinking of India with the chain chain vested, chakram throwing gentleman with the spiked shoes and all that. I'm thinking of the Callery Payette practitioners with the extremely long metal whip swords. I'm thinking of the African wrestlers that spend nearly all day getting ready to wrestle in sand pits. I'm thinking of sumo wrestlers and knife fighters in from indigenous peoples here. Like there's so many. There are even lots of stories told um, about heroes and mythology and wrestling, wrestling storm spirits and bears and animals and things like that. Yep. Tired Need Sleep says modern military, CQC fighter. Yep. Close quarter combat fighters. Yeah, of course. Krav Maga is a perfect example. So, a martial expert is not something that is unknown to the world, but monks are that's an extremely specific thing. So I think it's just the terminology, and I think that's why many times when we think of the monk, they don't fit into Dungeons and Dragons. Where I would contend that no, I wouldn't just contend. You can do a very quick search on YouTube and find plenty of medieval um, people dedicated to medieval martial artists using long swords, maybe some lighter, less plated armor, and taking people down. And as a matter of fact, a lot of martial arts have come from years of people practicing warfare and going, you know what, there's a better technique to use this. Hey, I can take my enemy down if I disarm them, trip them, all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Gaster Two Soul says, I like the idea of a blind monk who still keeps their monkish tendencies but could still kick your ass. Yeah, the idea of the blind monk, the one armed swordsman is a big thing. And again, like I said, especially here in the States, since the 70s, there's just been, I mean, heck, there's a song called Kung Fu Fighting. Everybody wants Kung Fu fighting. I mean, television. I just remember growing up on the weekends. I believe it was Saturday afternoons or something. There was Kung Fu theater, and they would play these old. Not all of them were the best quality, mind you, but for its time, I mean, where there's plenty of yep, like Caster Two Soul says, Karate Kid. Yeah, so martial arts is not something new, and to Dungeons and Dragons, to ancient peoples, to fighting at all. There are just some people that are just have mastered a manner of using weapons in their hands and their fists to great extent. But since this is Monster Monday, one of the things that one of the issues that often comes up is that, great, you can use your hands and feet, but what are you going to use your hands and feet on? Are you going to use them against oozes and ghosts and uh, beasts in the wild, all those dire carnivorous beasts and such? I mean, are you going to use your hands and feet against them? In what world do we have that? And so I think if you're going to include the character class monk, if you're going to include martial artists, they should also have there should be a reason why they are in the world. They should have their own adversaries that they contend with, right? And how the way they solve their problems, there should be the problems that they can solve with their capabilities. Gaster Two Souls, like their punches and kicks are so hard that the afterlife feels it. Yes. Now, if you actually take a little deeper look into some of the mythology and um, I want to call them like almost like Aesop's fables in many ways about some of these stories in martial culture, you will find that there are plenty of heroes that that do battle with giants, and they do battle ghosts and undead and solve problems and things. And I think the one of the problems that we have as creators is is that when a player, it's been described to me, this isn't something I created, it's been described to me that you can describe every character class not by their title but how they solve a problem, right? So a barbarian solves a problem by getting mad and wanting to hit it. A cleric solves a problem by relying on by having faith, and a monk solves a problem by achieving some kind of synergy or perfection with their mind and body and their spirit. And that triumvirate, that body, mind, spirit, that is part of the monk, is not only how they solve problems, but I think that's what kind of challenges they should have. And so their adversaries should be similar in capability. Gaster Two Soul says, perhaps monks aren't just humble worshippers of relationships, but could also act as healers. I call them monk ministers, monks who use the power of the gods along with rare herbs and liquids to cure them and probably cure others and such. We also, despite the fact that we think of these practitioners of martial perfection, we often don't think of them as being evil. But even till today, there's a lot of people who practice martial arts forms, and they're complete a-holes, right? Like, yes, I get the fact that there's a commonality between the more you practice the ability to master basically how to harm and kill people, there seems to be a similar level in not wanting to do so because you know how to. Um, it's the lack of braggadocio, but there are lots of people who don't get too far, and they're a-holes. So here on Monster Monday, there are lots of adversaries we can use when we are incorporating like uh, monks in the game, to act as adversaries, people who challenge the PCs when it comes to their intelligence and their wisdom, such as basically manipulating hearts and minds, or manipulating the rules of society, or even maybe there's a pact made with fey creatures or elementals or elder beings or giants, or even those goblinoid hordes across the valley or something, and manipulating the rules so that society is turned upside down, and now the player characters have to jump in and like solve the situation, but they can't solve it with their not just with their fists, but they have to change the minds and bodies. Gaster, you're silly. Barbarians just punch the problem away. Wizards die from the +4 damage from said problem. It's silly. Bard just sings the problem as a ballad. Druids just calls the animals upon the problem. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to get dirty, but there's maybe I'll at the end. There's an old Grognardian T-shirt that that's a permutation of that, that I'll get into, that you younger fellows may not know about. But also, um, there is a passive aggressiveness that comes to classic monk tropes that can also make monks and monk-like beings uh, dangerous adversaries. And when I say passive aggressiveness, like it's the we don't get involved, we're by ourselves, we're just meditating in our own realm, while the rest of the world you know falls to a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and everyone's like, "Hey, monks, could you help us out?" And the monks are like, "Not really, no. That's your fault. We're just going to stay here and do our thing, right?" It's the it's the passive aggressiveness of like, yeah, we can beat ass, but why should we? We don't have to, and none of our people have to. As a matter of fact, there is even a many martial arts movies. Master Killer is one, also known as the 36 Chambers of Death, and the 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, which I'm not sure if that's had an. I'm sure it had another title, something related to Wu Tang at one point, but 8 Diagram Pole Fighter and the Master Killer, 36 Chambers of Death, had a lot to do with that, where, especially in 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, there's a warrior, he's defeated, his people are slaughtered, he's like a spearman, he breaks off the head of his spear, he goes to the monastery, he's like, please accept me into your monastery. He goes into a monastery, and the whole time they're telling him like, we don't fight wars, we just, and he's like, well, yeah, but you guys are like martial masters, and they're like, no, we don't fight wars, we only use our martial arts to defend ourselves against wolves. And at the end of the movie, of course, he leaves, having become this 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, and by himself he wants to go fight off the enemies, but he can't, because he's overwhelmed, and the other monks join him, and he's like, what, basically like, what the hell, what changed your mind? And they start using their stabs and start not punching, they start blasting people in the mouth with their spears, literally shoving their spears in the mouth and circling around and busting their teeth out. And they're like, "Oh, we're not fighting enemies. We're destroying wolves." And it's pretty funny, but it's a pretty good movie. And the same goes for that, where it's like it's a battle with hands and feet and weapons to achieve either some kind of enlightenment or solve an issue that can't be solved by punching and kicking. It's like we need to fight to get to a place, to the point where wisdom and intelligence can take over, and that's the idea. Gaster Two Soul says, I could definitely get behind the idea of a trickster monk, allowing them to just basically be like Loki or Odin. Odin wasn't a wise old man. He was a bit of a silly and clever bastard, and kind of just goes around. Those are many of. I can't think of a specific story from the Monkey King idea, but the Monkey King was a very trickster, neutral, not quite good, not evil, but a idea where the Monkey King was a martial trickster in um, in from our point of view in Eastern culture, and there are a lot of stories told about this particular character who went on these adventures and things and caused trouble and such. Much like I would say Hermes or Mercury from Greek and Roman mythology, Loki from Norse mythology, like oh, indigenous peoples, coyote spirit. I can't think of I can't think of it. I'm about to say Hiawatha, and that's not it, because Hiawatha was a hero. But anyway, lots of cultures have a trickster character who's not quite good or evil, but they cause problems and also are also brilliant enough to solve strange issues as well. So I like that. Gaster's like, oh my god, I fucking love that. Like, fine, you don't want to help? Fine then. I don't want to help you anyway. Barbarian, monk, heal my wounds. Monk's like, oh no, I think you can handle it handle it for yourself. After all, you're the best at everything. Yep. Yeah, like why should I help you out? Like, whatever. You're the one that got you. You're the one that waited in the battle in the front line. I didn't tell you to do that. A wise man once said, right? That whole idea. Now, uh, we do have lots of adversaries in Dungeons and Dragons um, that are, I'll say, try-based adversaries. I'm trying to come up with a good terminology here. The Sphinx, Nagas, hags kind of remind me of this, meaning like the Sphinx is known as this animal, more or less lion-headed monster that can ravage you and eat you, uh, gobble you up from head to toe. But they also are known to give riddles. And the ogre magi, the oni. I'm old enough to remember when it was just called the ogre magi. Um, the oni is a type of monster that was, a big, basically an ogre with magic, and also brilliant enough to challenge the intelligence of a lot of individuals. And so I think these are the kind of monsters that are the kind of adversaries that you can pull, and even just using um, humans, of course, or humanoids as well, where they cause a situation. Maybe they've summoned a creature or caused some kind of some kind of problem with the environment, maybe loss of harvest, or kidnapped the children, or mind controlled a major portion of the society, or prevented the sun from coming up, or all of these other external sources, even brought the dead back to life. And so the PCs, yes, they need to kick ass, but they also need to solve a situation that cannot be solved by beating the ass of the bad guy. Maybe they need to reenact a ritual, appease the gods, um, close a portal, speak words of contrition to an enemy, some kind of elder being that has come to life, et cetera, et cetera. Gaster was two souls says, a wise man once said to shut the hell up and let me do the talking, bud. Yeah, exactly. Now, another issue that comes up with monks in the game is that they tend to not be specialists. In many ways, the monk and the bard kind of run in the same ballpark, in the sense that while the bard does have a specialty of like charisma, lowercase charisma, influence, having that part of it, the monk tends to not be a specialist in one thing, but tends to have a number of different statistics. Right, they have some combat, They have some what Watsi has been calling ribbon abilities, where they are very narrative focused abilities. Like, oh, I don't age anymore. Well, uh, how often does that come up? Not very often, but it, like I said, if a player character has a way to solve a problem, then it's up to us as creators to have problems for them to solve in their very many ways. And some of that might be, gaining an ally that normally you would be an enemy, or having challenges that are not necessarily to the death. Lots of pit fighters, duels, things of that nature are problems that these kind of characters can solve. And why not, right? Experience is experience. I know in the old days it was like, stop talking to my experience points, I need to kill it, was a mantra. But there's nothing about the word experience that says you need to kill something. It means you have to have an experience with it. And that if that means talking to a clutch of ogres and convincing the ogres not to stop damming up the river because they are causing people to become dehydrated and die downriver, might be a way to solve it. Yep. Tired, needs sleep. Hey, TNS. TNS says, Monk, come here, evil necromancer. Let's sit down and talk instead of fight. Why are you so angry? Who hurt you? Perhaps we can drink tea and talk about it. Hey, who knows? Maybe so. And it is a strange thing to have an enemy that you empathize with, but some of those enemies are the best. The enemies you could empathize with are actually some of our best. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to change, but maybe the PC finds out that there's a reason why, right? Like, let's take something tropish like Batman and Mr. Freeze, right? Or Captain Cold, or whatever. The bad guy who has his wife in frozen stasis to cure her. I believe that is Mr. Freeze. I don't believe it's the Captain Cold. So anyway, so Mr. Freeze, I'm going to stick with Mr. Freeze at this point, is a empathetic villain, right? Hey, listen, I'm only doing bad things because I want to save my wife's life. And sure, it might behoove Batman to sit down and talk to him and like, oh, that's all you wanted? Pfft, I've got money coming out of my wazoo. I could solve that issue real easy, but that's not what happens, right? Mr. Freeze kills people and causes all kinds of crimes, and so it's too late for him. And so having it doesn't mean that the monk can't, you know, it doesn't mean a can of whoop ass can't be opened up later, but understanding why maybe the necromancer has been raising his dead village because they've been wiped out and no one came to the rescue of their village when they were suffering from a dread disease, because one generation before, the monks refused to heal them and bring them into their embrace and let them die at the gates of the temple. And so now the necromancer is there to enact revenge, and the PC is like, ooh, I didn't know that. Ooh, maybe there was something that we did. I didn't realize that. Now, that doesn't mean the necromancer's like, I'm glad you talked to me and you're all nice and stuff, but I need to enact my revenge. Or, too late now. I sure would like to take this all back, but too late. Undead horde. Maybe my soul is lost and maybe we'll meet again. But the undead horde, yeah, I can't do anything about that. You're going to have to solve that problem, right? So there are physical challenges too: climbing, jumping, swimming, um, uh, jumping, dodging, and moving through traps and things of that nature. The maelstrom of the natural environment, from storms and rains and mudslides and rock slides and thunderstorms and things, may be other kinds of tasks. Me, location, 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 having battles on rooftops, and the classic martial arts battle on top of poles, standing on top of poles with fire raging beneath one's feet while trying to battle an enemy. Gas of Two Souls brings up the idea of like the I don't age anymore. Like instead of I don't age anymore, it's only I aged once a century or something. Yeah, I mean, it's a it sounds cool on paper, but it really doesn't have any effect in the game. I mean, elves have a long lifespan, and so do dwarves classically in Dungeons and Dragons, but that doesn't really have an effect in the game, unless, of course, you encounter something that causes you to age rapidly. I remember those being problems in the old school um, Grognardian first and second edition. There were enemies that would age you when they touched you. It wasn't really a mechanical thing. You just literally just added age to your character. Yeah, you us humans would shrivel up and die, and the long-lived NPC, long-lived player characters would shrug it off. What, 50 years? Elf's like, whatever. Um, so I think lastly, I will say that yes, having NPCs, monk or monk-like NPCs, martialists, are a good thing. They could follow players around. They are capable of defending themselves in dangerous situations while also disseminating a little bits of wisdom. I would say that the be careful of making them a GM PC. In other words, don't make them a game master's PC where they are immune to everything, have all expert knowledge, and are never hurt, and solve all problems. You got to be careful of that, which is why oftentimes you'll see these kind of characters being very old, or feeble, or essentially they have a ironclad sense of morality. Like, oh, of course I could solve your problem, but I'm not going to, because you're the youngin and you need to go out there into the world and solve it yourself, right? So having this kind of like an NPC that's able to disseminate lots of wisdom, or of course the classic speaking in cryptic tongue, and it's like, just say it, just say it in a straight line. Don't give me anecdotes. Just tell me what I should or shouldn't do, right? Like, so you have the character that's like, look to the winds, and in 4 days hence you will see the answer upon the reflection of yourself and you're just like, oh my goodness, really? Enough with the riddles, right? So that's another type of a very common tropish NPC you can include as well. Um, Tired Needs Sleep says, how would you make a martial arts style monk while also being sensitive to cultures? I'd like to do that while also being respectful. Well, I think the first thing is, don't let's not again, like from the top, let's not use the word monk any longer. It is it, it a monk is a specified, I'll say, profession, as opposed to a martial arts expert. And we have martial arts experts all around the world, every culture, all throughout history. So I think we could be very respectful by doing that. Now, if you're specifically saying, "Hey, well, I'd like to play a real monk," how can we be respectful? I think it just behooves us to. I don't I'm not a gatekeeper, and I don't believe in gatekeeping as well. Meaning, like, if you're not part of the culture, you shouldn't be part of it. It's pretty ridiculous. I think it's okay to make mistakes. I like, for example, we all know that there's problematic language and depictions in the book Oriental Adventures that was released by Dungeons and Dragons, but I think it should have been released, because if it was not, we would never know what's good or not good, right? And so I think it's okay to make mistakes as long as we can look at ourselves and go, yeah, that's not really a good depiction. Maybe we can do better. For example, the idea that all monks are the same is not a truism, right? Like I said, there's there are some people that practice martial arts and think of themselves one way, and they're assholes, right? Just like anything, they are tall, short, skinny, fat, male, female, the quilt bagged, different version of LGBTQ, whatever. They're quilt bagged. They're rich. They're poor. They have jealousies and love lives and things like that, despite what we think of on the outside. And I think it's just a matter of removing the stereotypes, especially if you're going to do it. So that's what I would say. Now, some people would claim that stereotypes come from archetypes, right? Where a stereotype is, despite evidence of despite evidence that this isn't a thing, people still hold on to the stereotype, right? Like despite having evidence contrary to to what you believe, holding on to it, that's a stereotype. An archetype is, oh, there's a propensity for people to be this way, but not everyone is this particular way, right? Like there isn't a, like, for example, you could claim that oh well, hey, most saffron robed monks are trying to achieve enlightenment, are peaceful, and are vegetarian and like to meditate and what. Oh, okay, all right, you could say that there's a propensity, more likely than not, that they would be that way, at least outwardly. But when you get into it, I think they're just regular people. Sure, they be trying to strive for something, but they're just regular people, just like everybody else, just like everyone else around the world. So I would just say that if you're going to include them, if you're going to include the archetype or the stereotype, you should also include the breaking of those chains as well. And yeah, I mean, not everyone is a perfect martial master, even if they claim to be. Not everyone has is a perfectly, how would I say, a an individual who has a an ironclad attachment to the profession that they are. You know, not every ogre carries a big stick and just wants to kill things. Maybe some of them love butterflies, or likes to listen to great music, or likes to carve figurines and play with them in the afternoon. Right? Not every ogre wants to just steal the grog from the dwarven hold or something and whatnot. Maybe there is an ogre that wants to learn how to read and steals books or something and is frustrated, doesn't know how to ask how to be taught how to read. No one believes the ogre wants to read, but the ogre is like, I've got all these damn books and I want to learn how to read, but it frustrates me and gets pissed off about it. Right. So maybe that's why he wants to go smashing the heads of wizards, because he's jealous. So you can start creating storylines with the the pulling on the threads of the tropes. If someone wants to be a martial master, focusing their energies on something, why? Why do they want to be that way? What makes someone want to seek enlightenment for some reason? Was it some past deed, guilt, whether real or perceived? Were they forced into the lifestyle? Maybe there are people, maybe the player characters find a temple of martial artists, but they're not all monks. Maybe there are fighters and barbarians in there, and rangers and warlocks and sorcerers and clerics all mixed in. Sure, they may all dress alike, but not everybody's going to be a monk. Maybe somebody turns out to be a fighter and they're just good with weapons, and that's it. Or someone turns out to be a ranger and they're like, they practice their animal style martial arts out in the woods and they're very good at it, and they just happen to be a different class style. Or maybe, just maybe, there is something to be said for the origins of some of our classic monsters, and maybe one or more of these martial retreats are there to prevent the the spread of something that is causing individuals to maybe mutate, or maybe something is, there's some kind of temptation or corruption or something, and the only reason that they're monks is because if they weren't, they'd be something even, they would be something even more wild, like, say, a place that's filled with like lycanthropes or something, or shape changers, or what have you, or heck, even maybe they're even keeping back a a bloodline of individuals that, if it wasn't for their teachings, they would lose control and become, or turn, or fall into something else. So I think there's a lot of storylines you could pull off of, in terms of kind of breaking off little bits and chunks of martial styles. And again, Spartan warriors, I'll say, double bladed rapier and dirk wielding medieval fighters would be a martial artist. I'm trying to go for other cultures here where there could be an elite members of a culture like an elite guard. Like let's go with gladiators and Spartan warriors, right? They could very well just be this culture's version of monks and martial artists. They just happen to be the elite version of whatever it is. And so, yeah, maybe the words that they say and the way they come across may not appear as the saffron robed Far Easterners compared to us on the stateside, but yes, they could still be martial artists. So someone in a rapier and lighter clothing and a dagger in one hand and a rapier in the other could very well be a version of a martial artist, or heck, like you said, a street brawler, a boxer, a pit fighting wrestler in an urban setting, a um, a, a just a bare knuckled enforcer running around with rogues in a major city could very well just be a monk, and maybe they just have a code of conduct like, hey, I'm a bouncer. This is what I do. I throw people out of taverns, or someone who's learned how to fight on the streets or live on the streets, and uh, they've learned how to parkour and free run their way through an urban setting, and that very well may be their form of practicing. Now, of course, you can change things like chi and ki and what are there some other um, chakras, and like you could come up with your own terminology for those things instead of using the monk's key abilities. Maybe there's something else, whether it is centering oneself or I don't know. You can do do a little Google thesaurusism and find some other words that might fit into the same thing. Again, not getting caught up in the semantics of a thing, but getting into the thing. So we're going to talk about the monk later on this week. Tomorrow's trope Tuesday. Of course, we talked about tropes today, but we're going to get into some of the kind of naked need sleep brought up about how would you make a martial arts style monk while being sensitive. We're going to talk about that, and maybe even stretch some of those tropes. Like, for example, I'm going to say this: like, why are there no Dungeons and Dragons animal style monks in Dungeons and Dragons? Right? Like, we know about the Drunken Master and Eagle Claw and what are some other monkey style or something, but why is there no Manticore or Direwolf or Red Dragon style martial arts? Like, there should be, because if they are if they are immersed in the Dungeons and Dragons world, why wouldn't there be dragon? I'm not going to say dragon riders or dragon slayers, but dragon worshippers is the wrong way to do it. But iconographers that look at, much like the person who created monkey style martial arts by watching the moves of monkeys, and mantis was 7-star mantis by watching the moves of a mantis. Why wouldn't there be someone who watched a gargoyle or a manticore or any of these other uh, what we consider to be common monstrous entities, and mimicking their capabilities and how they fight and such? Why wouldn't there be? And I think there would be. Just That's just in my opinion. Instead of keeping them off to the monks always seem like they're kept off to the side. Although maybe that could be done by design, because so many people hate the term monk or don't like the idea of monk being mixed in with their medievalisms. But whatever. But anyway, guys, I want to thank all of you, Gaster Two Soul and Tired Knee Sleep, and everyone else who finds the show later on. Thank you very much. I do read the comment section, uh, despite the fact that I may or may not be able to respond to them. So please drop a comment. Please join the Discord, whatever. Everything you need to know about me and the channel, just do a little bit of search, look down below, or type in a RPG with DBJ, or look up DeVabry and Jackson online, and you'll find everything there. By the way, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for liking, sharing, subscribing to the channel. Everyone have a great day. I will see thee tomorrow, bright and early. Thank you very much. Have a great one. Bye.